And good evening, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I'm your host, as always, Tony Defio, and I thank you for joining me on this lovely Friday night in Pittsburgh. And as I always say, I hope it's lovely wherever you're watching or listening right now, if you're listening or watching live. And if you're listening on an audio platform after the fact, I hope it's lovely wherever you are right now. I know winter's fast approaching. Was 70 degrees the other day. Now it's in the 30s, so that's Pittsburgh for you. And before I get started, I just wanted to, as always, encourage you to please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel where we bring you live shows like this one each and every day. We have The Hangover, we have Touchdown Under, Know Your Enemy, Steelers Preview, Steelers Postgame Show, The Scobro Show, and many more. So please subscribe and also you can check out our live shows on Facebook, which you're probably doing right now if you're on Facebook and you're on the Behind the Steel Curtain Facebook page. So hello, and as always, you can check out all of our live shows after the fact on any audio platform, and of course you can check out. I'm sorry, we also have a whole host of audio-only shows that you could check out on any audio platform, including Jeffrey Benedict's From the Cutting Room Floor, Matty Peverall's War Room, Let's Ride with Jeff Hartman, The Live Mic with Michael Beck, The Stat Geek with Dave Schofield, so much stuff. Chris Pugh, everybody, there's fantasy football. We have so much content for you. It's amazing how much our podcasting platform has grown. So please check all of that out. And of course, check out Behind the Steel Curtain, the website. We bring you news, commentary, film breakdown. It's your one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs. And I think it's the best Steelers site on the internet, including Steelers.com. I'm just going to say it. I don't care what anybody says, except maybe the Steelers. They might sue me, but whatever. That'd be pretty cool. Let's see who we have in the live chat, by the way. And of course, Jared Devil was number one. We have Steeler Chick 46, Owen David, who comes to us from Britsburg, Great Britain, London, England, I believe. Michael O'Malley, Sean Manahan, Steelers Pittsburgh. Kathy Ford. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. We have a nice big family tonight. I'm glad you're all with me to talk about our Pittsburgh Steelers. And of course, we have to begin with last Sunday, 16-16 tie in the wet and the slop and the cold at Heinz Field. And, obviously, things changed the day before when it was announced that Ben Roethlisberger would miss the game due to testing positive for COVID. So that threw a wrench into everything. And I think everybody pretty much found out around 8 o'clock last Saturday night that Mason Rudolph would get the start. And if we found out, 15 hours before the game, I'm sure he didn't find out that much not long before that. So that was a shock. And I think the game went pretty much as I expected it to go. I figured Rudolph would look like a backup. Which isn't to say he looked horrible. He looked like a backup. He looked like actually a solid backup who, made some mistakes, threw an interception early on after he led the team on a nice scoring drive to open the game, culminating in a touchdown pass to his college buddy James Washington. He kind of regressed after they threw a pick. He missed some wide open receivers. But he kept him in the game, and he also made some plays too. He made some nice throws, and he made a couple nice runs. He had a 26-yarder, which he looked a lot faster than I think anybody ever has given him credit for. And I think one or two plays later, he knocked a Lions defensive back out of the game. But on that very same drive is when he missed the wide open Ray McLeod for a touchdown. It would have been a touchdown, but they had to settle for 3 on that drive. Most people blame Rudolph for that, but if you as I understand it, Merrill Hodge, who really knows his football and does a lot of film work, he said that it was really McLeod's fault. He should have stopped short of the goal line or something like that. Either way, it wasn't a good look. But in overtime, he did make the necessary throws, I thought, to help them win, including that pretty sideline pass to Deontay Johnson that went for 39 yards. And, of course, he fumbled. They would have had first and 10 at the 42 to Lions 42, and who knows what happens after that. And then on the third and final possession of overtime, they took over, with like a minute and a half to go, something like that. He made a lot of nice passes down. He marched them right down the field. They were set up at the 39, but the final pass, the little 2-yard out to Pat Freiermuth, the rookie tight end, he fumbled. And I really don't know what they were trying to accomplish on that pass. I don't know if Freiermuth was the primary read or what, but if you want to blame Rudolph for that one, fine. I blame Rudolph, Tomlin, Canada, everybody involved with that play. Of course, Freiermuth too for fumbling, because I don't think it should have been called. I think right then and there they should have went with Chris Boswell, who is locked in. As I wrote about the other day, I think he's the best field goal kicker on the planet right now, and he made one from 51 yards earlier in the game in the third quarter, or maybe it was the fourth quarter. At any rate, it was cold and wet and sloppy, and Heinz Field is difficult to kick in to begin with. Yet he made a 51-yarder. He made 2 50-plus yarders the week before, the only kicker in Heinz Field history to do so. So the guy's locked in. I would have just like 20-some seconds left. I think it was was it first down at that point? Maybe it was second down. Either way, I think they should have kicked the field goal. If you don't make it, you don't make it. But I think he was your best option for winning the game at that point. And the fact that it never got to him, I think that's an indictment of Tomlin, Canada, of course, the players, everybody involved. It should have – Chris Boswell should have been given a chance to kick a field goal. But, turnovers happen, and if the Steelers had created a couple of turnovers, then we'd be crediting the skill involved in that instead of the mistake that we want to talk about whenever the Steelers turn the ball over. But, okay, fine. Turnovers happen, but I don't think Freiermuth should even be put in position to turn the ball over there on that final play. I think they should have kicked it right then and there. So those are my thoughts on that game. I think it really a tie there. It kind of hampers the Steelers a little bit moving forward. They still have 8 games to play. Everything's still in front of them, including 7 conference games and 4 divisional games. So it's not the end of the world, but everybody knows how much tougher their schedule is going to be down the stretch. Obviously, they have a couple games with the Ravens. They have a big game with the Chargers this Sunday night. The Titans, the Chiefs, so the Browns are not going to be a pushover, even though they're playing like it right now. The Bengals, they already beat them here. The Bengals beat Pittsburgh here at Heinz Field. So they play them next week, I believe. So I think this tie, it wasn't a loss, and people, as many people that were quick to remind us that it wasn't a win, or were also quick to remind us that it wasn't a loss, including my mom and sister. They're like, hey, they didn't lose. So I guess it's a glass half full way of looking at it. But still, you would like to, when you're facing a winless team at home, even with the backup quarterback, you'd like to think you could find a way to win that game. And they didn't lose it, but they didn't win it. So we saw how that hurt them 3 years ago when they had a tie in week 1, and it kind of haunted them all year, and they ultimately lost the AFC North by a half a game. And that's even after sweeping the Ravens in the regular season. I think they split with them still, though. I think they I don't know what the tiebreaker would have been had they both had the same record, but still it hurt them at the end. Of course, they also had a 2.5 game lead with 6 games to go. So, tie or not, I think, it wasn't. There's plenty of things you could blame for that, for them not making the playoffs in 2018. But as far as Rudolph's play, circling back to him, I know he took a lot of, as quarterbacks usually do, he took a lot of flack for his play. But I think people are viewing Rudolph much the same way they viewed Landry Jones, and that's somebody who isn't, they view him as somebody they think should have progressed much further than he has at this point because of, I guess, where he was drafted and a lot of the things that were said about him by the Steelers, that they had a first round grade on him, which might have been the worst thing they could have said about Rudolph, because people have never let them forget about that. But as far as like a backup quarterback, I mean, there are worse quarterback situations. There are worse backups in the league than Mason Rudolph. I think he's a pretty solid backup. He's never set the world on fire. He's never given you that holy cow, wow, this guy has potential moment. Unfortunately for him, but he has been pretty solid. I think I read it the other day: 16 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. I don't know what I think his completion percentage is around 60%. So his win-loss record isn't bad, but people are just, they're just so used to what Ben Roethlisberger can do, especially vintage Ben, going back to the mid 2010s, that anything by comparison just does not compare. So Rudolph and probably any quarterback that comes after him is gonna have a tough time pleasing the media and the fans, because it's just when you have a once in a lifetime player in Ben Roethlisberger, and that's what he is, essentially a once in a lifetime player. Those guys are hard to replace. I mean, look at a lot of teams around the league, and I've said this many times. The Dolphins have been looking for over 20 years for the next Marino. The Broncos have been looking for a quarter of a century for the next Elway, and they had to go out and get Peyton Manning at his ripe old age of 37, I think, to finally get a quarterback to win him another Super Bowl. So those guys are tough to replace, and even when it does happen, Aaron Rodgers is a great example of that. To draft a guy like that when you still have Brett Favre on your team, and for him to step right in and win you a Super Bowl within a couple of years, I mean, that's rare. But if you look at the Packers, since that Super Bowl 45 victory over the Steelers, they really haven't. They've been in contention. They've made it to several NFC Championship games, but they've never been back. So even with Aaron Rodgers, the Packers were never really able to match the success they had under Brett Favre. I mean, they both won one Super Bowl, but the Packers made it to a couple, and I think they seem to be much stronger contenders under Favre than they've been under Rodgers. The situation was a little bit different, I guess, because salaries weren't as crazy as they are today, and quarterbacks, even though they took up a large chunk of the salary cap, even in Favre's day, they didn't take up as much as they do now. So the situations were a little bit different. So you see how hard it is, even for Aaron Rodgers, to repeat the same success as the legendary quarterback that he followed. So I kind of resign myself to the fact that I don't think Mason Rudolph's going to be a future starter, but I'm okay with it. I think he'll be a solid backup, maybe a fringe starter for the right team. Who knows? Maybe the Steelers next year if they decide to go that route. Although I think it was interesting to read some reports that Jay Glazer from Fox Sports, I think that's who he's still with. He's real tight with Tomlin, and he reported that he believes that the Steelers are going to go for a veteran quarterback next year if this is Ben Roethlisberger's last year. And I think that's pretty telling because, and I'll get more into this stuff with reporters in a bit, but Jay Glazer, again, who's tight with Tomlin, and he has Tomlin's trust, and few reporters do, I think. He wouldn't put that out there unless Tomlin wanted him to put that out there. So I think that's pretty telling for what direction they intend to go in next year if Ben does retire. So, maybe those rumors of Aaron Rodgers, that flirtation with him, maybe that's still alive. Although, again, to repeat something I said a couple of times in previous shows, getting Aaron Rodgers, he might want to come here and they might want to get him, but getting him for the price that they're going to have to pay, that's pretty steep for a quarterback who isn't much younger than Ben. So, but there are it seems like there's veterans available every year, either through free agency or through a trade. So, who knows where that's going to go? But as of right now, it looks like, if you want to believe Jay Glazer, it looks like they might be leaning towards bringing in a veteran next year. So those are my thoughts on that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Chargers Sunday night. And wow, as I said a few minutes ago, that tie with the Lions really made things more difficult for Pittsburgh, because look what they have got going on right now. Ben Roethlisberger is still up in the air as far as whether or not he's going to play, because he hasn't had you need 2 negative tests for COVID, and he hasn't even had one yet, I don't believe. Or maybe he has one. I don't know. I don't think he has one yet, but he has to have 2 by the time, I guess by Saturday or Sunday, before he's cleared to play. And the Steelers are leaving for LA on Saturday at 3:00, which is, I think, kind of unusual. It's kind of late, but they've had such a poor record on the West Coast. Maybe they don't have to get acclimated to the time change. So you might not have Ben Roethlisberger. You definitely won't have TJ Watt. I think that's the biggest news of all. He's out with his hip and knee injury. Joe Hayden's not going to play. Kevin Dotson's not going to play. Minkah Fitzpatrick isn't going to play because he tested positive for COVID. So, yikes. So you're going to have to go to LA and try to win a game against a struggling team, a young struggling team, but they have one heck of a quarterback. And, you need a guy like TJ Watt to make life miserable for him. Without him in there, Taco Charlton, what's the other guy's name? Twiska, I always forget how to say that guy's name. That guy I never even heard of until TJ Watt got hurt the first time. And, of course, Alex Highsmith on the other side. You have Cam Hayward, who's having maybe the best year of his career. But, I mean, gosh, the more defenders that you take away from him, the more quality defenders you take away from him, the harder his job's going to be. So he can only do so much. You have Cam. Alex Highsmith is promising, of course, but he's no TJ Watt, at least not yet. You don't have Hayden, so you don't have Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's he hasn't been making many splash plays lately, but he's certainly capable of turning a game around with one interception or whatever. So it's going to be tough. I don't see how they're going to be able to generate much of a pass rush, to be honest with you. Unless it's certainly not going to be organic with a 4 or 5 man blitz or pass rush. They might have to implement a lot more blitzing than they have been. And, of course, you put yourself at risk when you do that. So it's going to be tough. This might be one of those games, and I'm going to get into him a little bit later, where a player like Devin Bush, who the Steelers invested so much in 2019, they trade up to the 10th pick. They trade away so much draft capital in order to get him, so he could be sort of like the centerpiece of their defense, the new Ryan Shazier. And he really hasn't lived up to that billing. So maybe he's somebody who can finally show us all why they invested so much in him. And what better time than Saturday night or Sunday night against LA? A game that it's not must win, but it would be really nice if you could find a way to steal this win. And I think that's what it would be at this point. they'd be stealing a game if they somehow went to LA with all their issues and won. So yikes. But I am looking forward to a couple of things. One, I want to see how Mason Rudolph, if he does indeed get to start at quarterback, I want to see how he does with a week's preparation, knowing that he's more than likely going to be the starter. It's not thrust upon him the day before like it was last week, and the conditions are going to be much better. The Chargers, their defense isn't the greatest, especially their run defense. So I'm interested to see how Rudolph responds to this opportunity. And I'm interested to see how the Steelers attack LA. Are they, the Chargers have the worst rushing defense in the NFL. They're giving up 155 yards a game. So what better way to really hammer? You've been using Najee Harris as a workhorse as it is. Why not give him another 5, 10, 12 carries, right? You gave him 26 last week, which I thought was questionable. I think they should have gave him a little bit more than that. Against the struggling Lions running defense. So pound Najee Harris. As far as what else I'm looking forward to, I want to see how Trey Norwood plays in this game, because I think he should get the start at free safety. People keep talking about Carl Joseph. I think he's just a sexy name at this point. Really, he's not really done a whole heck of a lot. He's just a former number 1 pick, I think, right? So people are intrigued by him, but he's more of a strong safety anyway. So I can't wait to see how Trey Norwood responds to this opportunity, because by all accounts, he's just a really, really heady, smart football player who's capable of doing so many things in the secondary. So I just want, obviously he's not Minka Fitzpatrick, but nobody needs him to be that. They just need him to be, they need him to hold down the back end of the defense and protect the last line of defense for the secondary. So I'm interested to see how he performs, and I'm interested to see if Alex Highsmith, speaking to him, if he can step up and really have a great. He had a great game a few weeks ago. I think it was the Broncos or the Seahawks, whatever game that was, where he had I think it was the Seahawks. I thought it was the best game of his career. Well, now they need that kind of performance from him again. Easier said than done without TJ Watt on the other side, but they need him to step up. They need somebody to generate a pass rush. So I want to see how Alex Highsmith responds to this challenge. And on that note, at the 23-minute mark, I will take this time to say goodbye to part 1 of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. If you're watching me live on YouTube or Facebook, don't go anywhere. I'll be right back in 2 and 2. If you're listening on an audio platform, well, I certainly thank you for listening to part 1 and downloading that. But please come back and download part 2 of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. And welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to part 2 of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I'm your host, as always, Tony Defio, and I thank you for downloading part 2, if you did that on an audio platform, or if you're watching live, I thank you for sticking with me through the break. It's great to be with you all. And before I continue with my topics, I wanted to highlight Rajon 39's comment, and he says, we went through the same thing with Landry Jones. Stop holding on to these guys if they're not performing by their 3rd year. Well, I guess it all depends on what you mean by performing. If you're talking about Mason Rudolph being a starting caliber quarterback by his 3rd year, 4th year, I guess now, well, I guess maybe you have a point, but as far as we all know, that's not what they're expecting of him. They're expecting Rudolph to be a really good backup, and I think he's been pretty solid. Nothing great, but solid. And I think if you look at most backup quarterbacks in the NFL, they're around what they give you, just about what Mason Rudolph gives you. Some a little bit more, a lot less. A lot give you less than what Mason Rudolph gives the Steelers. So I think that's a good comment, but I'm not sure he's not giving them what they're looking for as a backup. Now, speaking of Devin Bush, I think he's an interesting guy, and he has been in the news, really a lightning rod figure since the summer with the whole cat video thing and his comments and the retweet. But, especially lately, he's really starting to become a lightning rod for fans in the media because he's just not – he has not become that player that everybody thought he would become. Drafted him 10th overall back in 2019. They traded up to draft him. The next Ryan Shazier. He has not been that guy. And yeah, people were talking about the ACL, and that's a good point. It's 13 months since he had that torn ACL against Cleveland back in 2020. And, modern medicine has probably made us all a little bit spoiled. And, if you remember back to what Adrian Peterson did, basically a year after he suffered a torn ACL back in 2020, he suffered it in 2011. In 2012, he came within 9 yards of breaking Eric Dickerson's single season rushing record. So you hear of stories like that and you're like, ooh, you expect them all every player who has that kind of injury to bounce back like that. But it's more often than not, it's probably not realistic. So I get it. He's dealing with that still more than likely, but he had not really shown any kind of real flash either up until that injury. If you remember Ryan Shazier, when Pittsburgh drafted him, was it 14th or 15th back in 2014? I think it was 15th. He showed you flashes of brilliance. His very first preseason game against Buffalo at Heinz Field. I remember. I was like, wow. I think he had a pick, maybe a sack, just a lot of great examples of the kind of splash player he could be. And even though he suffered from the injury bug his first 2 or 3 years, by his second year, that playoff game against the Bengals, that wild card game that Pittsburgh should have lost by rights, he was the best player on the field on either team. And he was the sole reason why they won that game. And, he's the sole reason why the Bengals are going on 31 years without a playoff win. So Ryan Shazier had already shown up by his first and second year, and Devin Bush really hasn't. So, when people say you're being unfair to him for criticizing him, no, I don't think you are. It's year 3, and yeah, you have the injury issue, but you want to see something, right? By now, you want to see something at this point, something that makes you go, "Wow, that's why they did what they did when they traded up to draft him." That's what you're looking for. Just show us something. And Devin Bush really hasn't done anything. There's not one signature play I can point to after 2+ years that you could say, wow, that's why they drafted Devin Bush. And he has a chance to be something special. He just has not done that yet. So when people, and it's funny, and it's like Bud Dupree. People were so quick to jump on him and call him a bust. And I thought Bud Dupree showed more promise earlier in his career than Bush has so far. But a lot of people hated the guy. I mean, I don't know what it was about Bud Dupree, but a lot of people took it personally. His failure, his struggles over his first few years, and his character, what they perceived as character issues with him. As far as his social media stuff and everything. So people were quick to jump on him whereas Devin Bush, people were like, oh, wait a minute, he's not, give him more time, and I'm willing to give him more time, but I'm also willing to acknowledge that he might not live up to to his billing. And let me interrupt that for a moment. I have a $5 super chat from Sean Manahan. Let's see what he has to say. And Sean, thank you for the $5. By the way, it's always generous. I always appreciate when you guys donate to the cause. And he says, biggest issue I see with Bush, that he and Schobert essentially are the same player. When it was Bush and Vince on one was run thumper, the other was basically Ryan Shazier. That's what he was trying, CBR. And I think it's a good point. I think they are both kind of like the same player. They're both sort of, I don't know, was it Mack? I think it's Mack, the athletic linebacker, the Ryan Shazier linebacker. I think that's right. And that's true. They're both, anyway, they're supposed to be good in pass coverage, and they're not really heavy thumpers when it comes to making. I mean, they're obviously they make a lot of tackles, but they're not like thumpers like Vince Williams. And that's a good point. But I think another, and Robert Spillane has that kind of a Vince Williams sort of style, although I think he's a little bit better athlete than Williams was. But I think another problem with Bush and Spillane, or I should say Schobert, and you can throw Spillane in there too, is that they don't have a dominant line in front of them. I mean, yes, inside linebackers are supposed to shed blockers. That's part of the job, but it's also part of the defensive line's job to eat up blockers. And when you're down Tyson Alualu and when you're down Stephon Tuitt, and you have players like Isaiah Buggs and Carlos Davis, he's coming back, and Loudermilk, he's out, but he's part of the rotation now. It's who else? Mondo, those kind of players. They're not the same quality player as a Tuitt or an Alualu. So it's hard to keep those inside linebackers clean. So I think that's part of the problem too. Is they're not the line isn't dominating like it has in the past. So that's part of it's a big part of it's Bush and as far as like the Bush and Schobert not really living up to to what the Steelers need them to be. But part of it is they're just not. They're being forced to shed too many tackles or too many blockers, I think. So. As far as who the thumper is going to be, I don't think, there might not be anybody on the roster other than possibly Spillane. So. All right. I have one more topic I wanted to hit on. And that's another player that's come under criticism for maybe not living up to his potential or not taking his opportunity seriously. And I'm talking about Dwayne Haskins. Not to say that Devin Bush isn't taking his opportunity seriously. I just want to compare, throw Bud Dupree in there. I just want to compare how people react to criticism of one player versus another. So I think people are kind of more defensive of Bush and his criticism than they were of Bud Dupree. Now, Dwayne Haskins, Aditi Kinkabala of NFL.com and the NFL Network, she tweeted out something last week, essentially saying that Haskins wasn't taking his role as the backup behind Rudolph seriously enough. During practice, he was throwing lousy passes. He was checking his phone, and people jumped all over for that. Why? Because a lot of people don't like Aditi. I don't know why. I think a lot of it stems from the fact that they think she hates the Steelers, but most fans think national reporters hate the Steelers. Most fans of most teams probably think that way because their opinions are pretty much right down the middle for the most part, and they're not homers. So I think when people see somebody calling it right down the middle, they automatically think that they're against them, their team. So I think that's part of the problem. But anyway, people got all over her for that. But the thing I find funny about the Dwayne Haskins thing, and I talked about this on Monday on The Hangover, is that this is what she described was why he was cut by Washington less than 2 years after they drafted him in the top half of the first round of the 2019 NFL draft. He his very first victory, he was taking selfies with fans in the stands when he should have been in the victory formation. They had to go get the backup quarterback to run out the clock. Obviously, you know about the strip club stuff and the COVID violations last year. You know, and he played for a pretty reasonable guy, a pretty, I'd say, reasonable coach in Ron Rivera. Well, I think it's more of he's a player's coach along the lines of a Mike Tomlin. And yet they thought so little of his preparation and his attitude that they cut him. How often does that happen? You know, when Bill Cowher first came here in 1992, like it was Huey Richardson's second training camp, and Richardson was Chuck Noll's last number 1 draft pick, and he asked somebody, "Can we cut a first-round pick this early?" That's how unprecedented it is to cut a guy like that, especially a quarterback. I mean, that's a big investment. So that's what really shocks me, or makes me laugh, I should say, about people, is their unwillingness to believe it, and this kind of behavior is why Haskins is in Pittsburgh in the first place, because that's what got him kicked out of Washington. So why is this so implausible to believe? And I think when she kind of backed up her story by saying that there were coaches saying this stuff, they were talking about how immature they thought he was and how he wasn't taking his role seriously. I'm not saying that this is true, by the way. It's kind of like with the DK thing and Kevin Dotson in the summertime, him saying that coaches weren't happy with Dotson's preparation. I'm not saying this is true about Haskins, but perception is reality in the eyes of many. And, you know, look at Terry Bradshaw. Look at how long it took him to fight off his dumb reputation. So a player like Haskins, who I'm extremely intrigued by him, and I think he has the best arm on the team right now. And I think he has the most talent of the 3 quarterbacks that they have there. So I want him to succeed. But you know, if the perception is he's not taking things seriously, all she was doing was reporting what these coaches said. So I think the question isn't why is she saying this? Why is she stirring the pot? Which I think that's a stupid thing to say, but people always say it. The question is, why do these coaches think that Dwayne Haskins isn't taking his opportunity seriously enough? So, but the funny part about that tweet that she sent out, she didn't just diss Dwayne Haskins. She also called out Mason Rudolph. She said, you know, he's had 4 years to show the Steelers what he could do. And then she went on to say what she said about Haskins. And then she said, this is why Ben's still the quarterback. Okay. Well, I thought, and then, again, this goes back to, you know, the comparison with Bush and Dupree. People were quick to jump on her for what she said about Haskins, but you notice nobody had a problem with her saying what she said about Rudolph. Why? Because a lot of the fans are saying the same thing about him. It's been 4 years and he still hasn't progressed to the point where you have confidence in his abilities. And nobody had a problem with that. So it's just funny, like certain players you can criticize and nobody, yeah, you're right. Good point. Other players, you know, they don't want to believe it. So I just think that was an interesting study in fan behavior towards reporters. So that's pretty much all I have for tonight. I think I have another super chat. Did I miss another super chat? Yes, I did. Another $5 one from Sean Manahan. Thank you. And he says, get a 320 to 330 pound nose tackle that can help take up blockers. The run D will be just fine. Well, I don't think there's nobody floating out there like that right now, Sean. But as far as getting that kind of guy in the draft, I don't know if those kind of players really are in vogue anymore. Tyson Alualu, that's kind of like your more of a prototypical modern day nose tackle, even though he could play end or whatever. But those big cloggers are not really, those Casey Hampton type players aren't really in vogue anywhere. Everybody's getting sleeker and faster. And you basically just need players the caliber of Alualu and Stephon Tuitt to get healthy. That's really what they're missing. Although that's not going to happen this year, it looks like. At least not with certainly not with Alu, but probably not with Tuitt either. But those are my thoughts for tonight, and I will take some questions and comments. And thanks again, Sean, for the two $5 super chats. I really appreciate it. All right. Let's see what we have here. Steelers Pittsburgh says Ron Rivera is a good coach. I agree. I think he's a good coach. And I think for somebody like him to be so quick to move on from Haskins, I think that's telling. But at the same time, though, as I said a few minutes ago, I'm really intrigued by Haskins. I think I was impressed by what I saw in the preseason, and I really want him to succeed. So I hope, if he is sort of not taking it seriously, I hope he starts to do so. Or if the coaches believe he isn't taking things seriously, I hope he finds a way to convince him that he is taking it seriously. Because I think, he's an intriguing guy and somebody that, talk about stories, this Sunday night in LA. Oh, here we go. Kathy Ford. I knew I saw another super chat. Thank you for the $5, Kathy Ford. And she asks, what are you doing Thanksgiving, Tony? Watching football? Yeah. I'm going to go visit my mom. I always go visit her. She just had surgery. So, she's doing much better now. So she'll be really doing well next Thursday. So yeah, I'm going to go watch football at my mom's, stuff myself mercilessly. It's one of my favorite holidays, so I'm really looking forward. Thank you for asking. I hope you have great plans too for Thanksgiving. But back to the Chargers. I think there's a great. I think they're behind the eight ball as far as their injuries and the COVID absences. But I mean, imagine if Ben Roethlisberger came back, say he was cleared on Sunday or Saturday, and he comes back, and he leads them to a victory with all their injuries. That'd be a great story. Imagine if Mason Rudolph had a great game and leads them to a victory. Great story. Dwayne Haskins, say Rudolph struggles, and Dwayne Haskins comes in a la Duck Hodges a couple years ago and leads them to a come-from-behind victory. And people are talking about Dwayne Haskins now. The narrative shifts completely 180 from he's not taking it seriously enough to maybe he should be the starter, So there's a lot of possibilities for some great stories on Sunday night. So that part of it I'm looking forward to. I'm not looking forward to seeing them try to deal with so many injuries and COVID issues, but that's why I always say this. That's why sports is the greatest reality TV show. You never know what could happen. So I'm still going to be rooting like heck for them to try to pull out a win on Sunday. And I think they still have I give them a good chance, even with the injuries, because I don't think the Chargers are quite there yet as far as a contender. So we'll see what happens. Cecil Music says to reiterate what I kind of said about Jay Glazier and his report the other day about a veteran quarterback for 2022. I'm dreaming of Russell Wilson, but it could cost a lot. Well, yeah, that's the only issue. Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, those guys are going to command a lot in a trade. So, you might be looking at Teddy Bridgewater level veteran quarterback, who I think is a good quarterback, but like the dream veteran, the Russell Wilson, the Aaron Rodgers, that might be a little bit too much to ask as far as them trying to acquire those players. And Michael O'Malley asks, what system does Haskins need? His college system against college players? I don't know. That's a better question for a football expert to answer. I think the talent's evident. Definitely the talent's there. It's just a matter of him finding the right fit and developing it. And this is from Michael O'Malley. Again, if Haskins is so good, why don't the Steelers trade their really good third stringer and see what they get? Because, first of all, the trade deadline's over. That's one good reason. And if he's such a good quarterback, why would they want to trade him? Mark Tobin says the Steelers will be swimming in salary cap money next year. That's true. But of course, guys like Watt are going to start eating up that kind of that cap space. And this is what Brad Jewett, and he says, I like to see what Marcus Mariota would do in our system if Wilson and Rodgers are too expensive. Well, I'd rather have Haskins than Mariota. I'm not going to lie. I've never been a big fan of Mariota. I thought he was overrated. But you never know. You never know. What else we have here as far as the... And Mark Tobin says of the Haskins release by Washington, they cut Haskins because Gruden originally drafted him. Every coach picks their own quarterback. They rarely inherit someone else unless he's really good. Well, I mean, you're not going to cut a guy that you think is super talented just because you didn't draft him. I'm 99.9% of the reason why he was cut. Probably 100% of the reason is because Washington didn't think they could trust Haskins to develop and be a team leader and take it seriously. So again, it's really rare to release a guy that soon after you invest so much in him in a draft pick as a draft pick. And Steeler Chick 46 says, a college professor once told me motivation trumps talent. Haskins has talent but lacks motivation. Well, I think talent's a bigger deal than people think. And I'm not so sure if Haskins is lacking the motivation. You know, again, this is just maybe a perception that he has to fight through because of what happened in Washington. You know, remember, people thought that about Roethlisberger for years, that he was... They still do. A lot of people still think that about him. He doesn't take his preparation seriously, that he's lazy. And of course, that perception was much more of a thing in his earlier years. He didn't work out. They never saw him back when they had Polaroids on the sideline, and they never saw him reading the Polaroids. So, I mean, you know, and again, Terry Bradshaw had to fight the dumb perception for years. And he still hasn't gotten over it, if you've ever watch an interview with him about his time in Pittsburgh. So, you know, it might just be a perception. These coaches might just be succumbing to the power of this perception of Haskins. You know, maybe, you know how coaches are a different breed. Haskins could be 100% on point on the details, but yet, you know, it's just not enough for them because, you know, they want 190%. That's just how coaches are. You know, some of them are impossible to please. Head coaches, coordinators, you name it. And Cecil Music says, and Terry will be the first one to tell you this. Terry Bradshaw plays a dumb thing all the way to the bank. Yeah, well, he does now, but when he was a player, that, you know, aw shucks country boy thing worked against him when he was throwing more picks than touchdowns as the number one draft pick in the NFL in 1970. All right. What else? Do we have any more super chats? Did I miss any of those? So, yeah, my feelings about the Chargers game are going back and forth. Part of me thinks that it's going to be a nightmare on par with the Bengals game after TJ Watt got hurt and missed. Part of me thinks that they can rally and win much like they did 2 years ago with Duck Hodges. So I'm kind of in between. Part of me wants to say that they're going to lose 31-7. And part of me wants to say that they're going to win like 24-17. You know, it's just this game's hard for me to get a feel for because first of all, you don't know how the Chargers, like they might be missing Joey Bosa. He was a close contact COVID casualty. He might play, might not play. I don't know. And of course, we don't know about Ben. So it's a hard game to really get a feel for. And Erica J says the Cardinals are inconsistent. They are, but sometimes the healthier team wins. Sean Manahan says 23-16 Steelers. I hope so. All right. I think on that note, at the 9:50 mark, I will take this time to say goodbye. This will be the last time I talk to you on this show before Thanksgiving, so I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. But I'll see you again before then. I'll talk to you on Monday with Brian and Shannon White on the Steelers Hangover. Hopefully, we're talking about a Steelers win. That'll be the first day of my orientation. I have to do a virtual orientation for my new job. So I'll be sitting right here for 9 hours. Well, 8 hours, but there's a lunch. So it's 9 hours total. So I'll be ready to talk some football. That's how stir crazy I'll be by the time the Hangover comes on Monday. So I can't wait to talk to you guys then. And in the meantime, have a great weekend and go Steelers.